That was something that some of the challengers as well as some of the incumbents spoke about, and the audience was very keen on trying to understand who had what position on being responsible for developing public policy.
Yes, yes, they were. And it's an ongoing debate, as I've learned during my first term here. Where does the jurisdiction, if you want to use that word, for a school board member lie in making policy, and where should we be seeking contributions from various stakeholders, and how much weight should those contributions have? It's a conundrum for any elected official. I just feel here in the 21st century, where people have so much specialized knowledge now, and you touched on it a little bit earlier, in terms of information technology, so I can sit at home and I can say, okay, let me look up special education and some of the best practices on helping students who have special needs, or let me look up how to teach principles of science because we need to increase our STEM education across the district. And then they can come at you with those kind of questions or that kind of discussion. And then I'm like, as a board member, oh, wow, okay, let me consider that, let me research that, can you give me some resources? So I'm open, I'm not coming with all the knowledge.
Right,
yes.
and I think sometimes in this discussion of public policy, there will always be some folks who say, well, if you get too involved with public policy, then you're micromanaging. But I have always found that part of being able to distinguish whether or not if you're micromanaging versus creating public policy in a framework is with regard to how you frame the question. If you're saying, I'm going to tell you how to do your special education program tutorial for these students, well, that's probably micromanaging. On the other hand, if the board says, we support and pass a resolution that says we support a program that does A, B, C, and D and addresses these needs A, B, C, and D, well then that's a policy because it allows enough leeway for, in your instance, for teachers, for the administrators to say, okay, well, there's all these kinds of tools we can use to accomplish these goals and this measurable outcome. And that's, I guess, maybe you could talk a little more about that.
Yes, and one example of that, so we passed our strategic plan back in March that we call our Strong Schools, Strong Communities. One of the pillars of that strategic plan is, at that time, called managed instruction. So the ideal, and we actually have already implemented a policy change that deals with managed instruction. So the ideal of managed instruction was that in all of our now 76 schools and programs that we have in the school district, a family can know that their child or children, when they go to school, will have a certain level of academic rigor, certain principles that are always met in math instruction and reading instruction, writing instruction, etc. What a lot of people thought it was saying was the district administration was going to control what and how a teacher could teach in the classroom. So we had some pushback on that. And what we've developed over the past few months here is what we call district-wide action teams, where there are committees made up of employees from the school district, parents, community leaders, and some of the school board members on different ones. And one of those dealt with that managed instruction, and they decided, that's such a term that is off-putting to some people, again, listening to feedback, let's call it aligned learning. So what we really want is a direction set that any kind of instruction, so math instruction is going to follow in alignment. So as you go from elementary school to elementary school, you always have X, Y, and Z kind of principles being aimed toward in that math instruction. How the teacher does it, he or she still has creativity. They may, following the curriculum, they may use games on a certain day, use specific pedagogy in a certain day, have the students work together in a certain day, as we do with our math instruction right now at the elementary level. And then as you move to the middle school, then it's going to happen this way overall. So we're not trying to tell people,
and I think that's so important in the classroom that the teacher, who is the one dealing with those students every day, they have to kind of adapt to who those students are, what their needs are, how they're feeling that day, all these kinds of things that Boy, I'll tell you, if I had to figure out how to manage all of those factors every single day, every day totally brand new, it would, you know, I would be a lot more tired by the end of the day than I am now.
Exactly.
You know, but you know, and this idea, you know, that, you know, and teachers do have, obviously, a certain amount of professional discretion in the classroom to know how it is they need to respond to certain situations to accomplish what has to be done at the end of the day. Because in Minnesota, there are indeed standards that have to be upheld, correct?
Very much so. Statewide standards and federal standards. And as a brief commercial, you know, right now we're operating from the federal level under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which most people know as No Child Left Behind. So tomorrow morning in the Senate, there will be a hearing of a bill to begin addressing changes in the current act, which was enacted in 2001, as a reminder to the viewers. We, as school board members and school district leaders, have been pushing for changes for a long time. As people may recall, the original act from 2001 had a requirement that by 2014, by the end of school year 2014, all school districts across the country would be able to say all of their students, 100% of the students, would be 100% proficient in reading, writing, and math, the three key areas that are measured right now through the statewide testing. So as that's about to be adjusted, because no school district is anywhere near 100% proficiency right now across all their student demographic groups, the discussion begins tomorrow morning. I know Senator Franken is one of the leaders in trying to make some changes and make that act more realistic for what we do at the local level. So we're excited about that.
Well, that's good. And I know before we started the program, and I don't want to forget to mention this, so that's why I'm doing it now, because you triggered a thought in my mind about this. You had mentioned that the school district has updated their website.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that, and we do have a screen that we'll put on the TV also, so that our viewers know exactly where to go. So go ahead, tell us a little bit about that update.
Yes, one of the opportunities, going to use that word again, that I've noticed since coming on the board, and some of my current board members already knew about this, is, you know, we have a website and it served a lot of needs, and it was a pretty good website. But one of the challenges it had was it's hard to navigate sometimes when parents and students and others needed to find some crucial information. And so my colleague Ann Carroll was one of the leaders in saying, is that going to be put on the website? And then I would be one of the people from my IT background saying, and will it be easy to find?
Yes, that's right.
And so we've been asking that of the communications directors and the people in administration who work on the website. So we have a new leader now, a woman named Julia Schultz-Brown. It was some fantastic work, give her some props here. And so she made it one of her first goals was to update the website. So right now, as you go out and look at spps.org, and you see it's going to be graphically, visually, you know, exciting, as I like to say, and you have some rotating images, and you have, ideally, I think, some menu options and links that you can click on and find information a little more easily than maybe if you've gone to the site before. And I think there's a place where you can enter some comments and give her feedback.
Right, and you brought up a couple of things that I think is so important when you're talking about trying to get information out to the public.
Yes.
Because you hear so much talk about transparency, the importance of transparency. We all want to be transparent. Okay, let's all be transparent together. Okay, wonderful. Except that I find that there's really three key aspects to transparency in order to actually make something transparent whatsoever. That certainly the information, first of all, has to be available to the public, that somehow or other it's there for them to access. And then it has to be, okay, it's available, but then it has to be accessible, which again, a lot of times you can have all kinds of information on a website, but if you can't really quite access it, and you can't find it, what good was it all?
Right.
And then that third key component is it understandable? So then you've got it, you got it in your hands, now can you understand it?
Yes.
And once you've matched, at least in my opinion, once you've met all those three thresholds, you're on your way to saying you've got transparency.
That's definitely one key component to that. And related to that, I wanted to say, as you go on the website, you see you have a chance of selecting 4 different languages, English and Spanish and 2 other languages. But we also are mindful as board members that not every family member or every student has access to a computer.
That's true.
At their home. And so we do continually remind our superintendent and our district leaders, along with the information being on the website and being accessible and understandable, as he talked about, is that we still need to provide some print materials or other ways to communicate with those families, those parents who don't have access to that technology. Maybe they can go to one of our great public libraries in St. Paul, the communities here, and get on a computer for an hour, but on a regular basis, they can't access that information that way. So we are still mindful that provide it electronically, but also provide it in some good printed materials, a good written form in languages that families can read and understand. So that's important too.
And I think that's a very important point.
Yes.
Not everybody has access to a computer, to the internet, and you do have to still have things in print.
Yes.
And not just say, well, it's on the website.
Right.
Because there again, if the way that they need it to be accessible to them is in paper, and you only have the website available, you've not passed that hurdle of transparency.
And believe me, we hear about that. Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. And there's another, I'll just kind of pass this thought along, that there's this other group of people that I've been talking with about some of the various concerns that they have where they're trying to expand hours or whatever at the St. Paul community rec centers in certain areas of town. And one of the ideas that they have come up with, they thought it would be great if there was a computer kiosk at these community rec centers. And that could tie in very well. I could see with the school district there in St. Paul, the 2 of them working together in partnership, trying to figure out how can we have a few additional terminals available, especially for those families that that they don't have it at home.
Yes, and I like that idea because, number one, it helps build that partnership that I talked about earlier that we need as a school district. We need to keep partnering with all of our community organizations and agencies, and especially our rec centers. And those rec centers provide an opportunity for our students to continue learning or some positive activity after their school day. In St. Paul, we have a program now called Sprockets. It used to be called Second Shift. So after the school day, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, students can go to rec centers and other places and continue some learning or some physical activity, so they can stay in that positive activity mode. And so that's something that I'm looking forward to, that partnership to continue.
Yeah, good.
And one idea I have, like the kiosk, because I'm focused on bringing opportunities for our high school students to do either work for pay or volunteer work or tutoring. So I think it'd be a great opportunity if we get those kiosks built to get some of our high school students to go in and offer to teach end-user computing skills.
Right, and think about what a positive impact that would have not only on those older students who are given a role of responsibility, but also to the younger kids that they are helping, because then they will have a role model of somebody that they can look to in their neighborhood, in their community, and say, oh, I know this kid, they've been helping me on the computer and trying to figure things out or helping me with my homework. And then that older child has that feeling of responsibility, of community, of belonging. And I think one of the challenges that in talking with people in St. Paul that I have heard is this idea about how can we keep our children engaged and feeling like they belong, because that's one of the attracting aspects of being in a gang is that you have a sense of belonging, that you are important, you have some kind of responsibility somehow, as ill-guided as it is, you get those things. And so the challenges are how to find those kind of positive engagement opportunities for those young people in our communities, because once they're out of school, they've got the whole evening to get into trouble.
That definitely could be a path they can choose. And again, it goes back to that cultural competency I talked about. And as for other parts of the country, but here in the Midwest, that cultural of family and belonging. And so as he talked about, if our students aren't getting that in a positive way through their family structure in the school environment, then they might choose a path of a group that takes them down to some negative activity and negative attitudes. And so every chance I feel we give our high